So I will let them begin with introductions from themselves and tell us, in a couple of minutes, what they see as their most salient, contributions, and then we'll enter the space of the discussion itself. Okay. Check.
We're talking about ourselves?
Yeah, just a couple of minutes, just a very brief introduction, so we connect up here.
So I have been known as a person from tires to telecom to tanks. So 3 T's, that's all I did in my 35 years. So now, as chairman of Mahindra Aerospace and Defense, we have few companies which are involved in manufacturing items. Perhaps all of them are high priority items for Make in India. Also, as head of president of group strategy for entire group, I have a good fortune of looking at 18 different industries where this $18 billion group is involved in, and we try and prioritize how best we can serve the needs of the society where we operate and how we can have global competitive advantage with the rest of the world. Thank you.
So good morning. I have a unique career because I started my career from the service sector. I was with Tata's actually, the Taj group of hotels. I shifted gears and went to Citibank for a brief while in the consumer finance, and then I shifted to manufacturing, the old brick and mortar business, and I have remained cemented in this business for now over 2 decades. When I joined my company, which is it's about $5 billion listed company in India. It's also on a turnover basis about 2 billion in India, but we are part of a global major called Wholesome, which also has big operations in US. That's about 22 billion global turnover. I joined the company when we were just about 1 million ton, a small company with in Indian rupees about 200 crores. Today we are close to 10,000 crores in turnover, and we have 17 sites. We have 15,000 direct indirect people who work for us. And I think in our own way, Make in India, we are also giving our bit to the country, because after all, we give cement and concrete, which makes the nation. So that word I pass on to a guy in the steel sector.
Cement India.
So good morning. Unlike Mr. Shukla and Mr. Kapoor, I have been primarily only in one company. And out of last 23 years, my career has been evolving. And I have been in project execution and then subsequently to investor relations, corporate strategy. So here I am.
Thank you. I've been with the Tatas for 33 years. I joined straight from campus with TCS. I was with them for 26 years. I have extensive project execution globally with large customers. When I moved out of TCS, I became the operations director for Tata Power. I was with them for 6 years. And the two industries are completely different. One is a people-intensive, asset-light. The profit margins growth is only in the northeast direction. It varies between 45 degrees to 60 degrees. That's the only change. When I moved to the power sector, it's a different world by itself. It's very asset-intensive. I have never visited a government office for 26 years in my career. In the last 6 years, I was only in the government offices. So the ex-chief minister, Mr. Chavan, is here. And I think that gave a completely different perspective in terms of business and industries in India. Recently, I've taken over the role of the business excellence person for across the group, Chief of Business Excellence. And my mandate is to enhance the business excellence of the Tata Group companies.
Thank you. Well, folks, then what we'll do is we'll begin with, I think, several of the... this should be working. Several of the speakers have referred to Make in India, so perhaps it would be useful to get their perspective on what they believe this means in the first place. Mr. Shukla, could we start with you, telling us what Make in India really... what you take away from it, and what is it, so at least our audience, we're all on the same page with what this Make in India campaign is about.
Let me say this. It is not that we are going to start making something in India now. We have been making many things in India for a very long time. Not many people realize that we are among the top 3 steel makers in the world, top 3 rice producers in the world, top 3 wheat producers in the world, top 3 milk producers in the world. And I can go on listing. We are practically in the top 3 of everything. Why rest of the world does not see it? Because our consumption is very high, with the 2nd largest population in the world. So while we may be top 3 in all the items I listed, none of them figure in exports significantly. So you will know America as producer of wheat because they export a lot. You will know Australia or Switzerland producer of milk products because they export a lot. So I stop here. Second, therefore what Make in India comes down to is in 2 distinct parts. And that's what I shared with the Prime Minister in Vibrant Gujarat and the Finance Minister in Davos, World Economic Forum, that Make in India has to be seen in 2 parts. One, make more in India. And that is things which we have been making but not making enough. These are the things which fall essentially in consumer products categories. So make more in India will mean that we make and now we are able to export also. So whether it's soap or shampoo, textiles or garments, shoes, there are 10,000 items which we make in India but essentially for local market. And the second category of Make in India will be make first time in India. And I think when people say make in India, generally they are referring to what will be done for the first time in India. Today we are the 5th largest aviation market in the world. And by 2020, India will be the 3rd largest aviation market in the world, which means Indian airline companies will be buying 3rd largest number of aeroplanes in the world. Why don't we make them in India? That is one question. India has the 3rd largest army in the world, 5th largest navy in the world, 5th largest air force and 6th largest navy in the world. Please tell me, why should India be the largest importer of defense equipment in the world? If it was 5th largest, 6th largest, I could have understood. The anomaly is with 5th largest air force and 6th largest navy, we are the largest importer of defense equipment. That discrepancy between being at consumer level 4th, 5th, 6th, but at importer level number 1 is an issue. And that is another thing we should make. We produce largest amount of textiles in the world today. Of course, most of it goes for our own population, but textile machinery is imported. We perhaps have largest number of people among the top 2 or 3 on Facebook or Twitter, but handsets are all imported. So we are talking about make first time in India many items and make more in India lots of items where we are world leaders already. Thank you.
What is your take on the Make in India?
I think
as a global manufacturing hub, do we have that capacity? Do we have that? What do you see as, what is your take on this?
I think first is what does it mean, Make in India? Like Mr. Shukla rightly mentions, I mean, we have been one of the biggest manufacturing, countries. And I think today we are already amongst the top 6 or 7 in the world when I look at the pecking order. I think China is the biggest with about 3 trillion in manufacturing, and India is about number 7 or number 8 with about 0.224 trillion. The political decision comes from the fact that today structurally, if you look at your economy, industry is about 15%, and more than 50% is services, and then little less is agriculture. I think it's about 12 or 13%. Now, if I look at China, and I'm sure that's a hot topic going to be today as you move on to the next series of questions. If you look at China, China is about 32% and Indonesia is about 24%. Now, the problem with this is the number of jobs which a services sector creates versus manufacturing is not helping India. And when I look at over the last 2 decades, the job creation has not been so significant when you look at your GDP growth, which has been about 6 to 7%. So I think from a political perspective and also from a social well-being perspective of a country where you have haves and have-nots, and you have 60 to 70% of the population living in your villages, and that's where the per capita at about 1500 USD versus 6000 USD for China, and 52,000 USD for this great country where I'm speaking today. So that's the big, challenge which India faces. Make in India basically, along with the new manufacturing policy, which was I think brought by the previous government, is one and the same thing. It's better branded by the current Prime Minister, who's very good at it. But end of the whole thing is 100 million jobs to be created. And I think to shift this needle from 15% to 25%. Now, just to give my example for a sector which I know better, in early 80s, cement was a regulated sector. It was controlled by the government in 82. It was full control, which means the price of cement and the production of cement was determined by the government. In 89, it was decontrolled, and now it is fully free. So it's anybody, any entrepreneur can bring his money and put up a cement plant. There is no price barrier, there is no nothing, there are no other issues. It's as free as it can be. So today, India is outside of China, and that happens with most of the products. People just remove China, then look at the world. India is the #1 cement producer in the world. And I think we have shifted this in the last 2 decades, and there is no government present. Other very famous thing which our current Prime Minister says is government has got no business to be in business. And I think if you can make business more easy and more comfortable, I think that's the best thing a political environment can give it to entrepreneurs, because Indian entrepreneurs are very smart. So for me, Make in India is an example like cement, where we are the #1 producer in the world outside of China. But the gap is that China is 1,000 million tons a year, India is 260 million tons a year. And then you have US, and then you have a whole lot of other countries. So I'll just, I guess, pass on with that.
Mr. Jain, could you comment a little bit on, and maybe moving to a little bit more on the specifics, what do you see as the challenges in, going along this path of Make in India? What do you see as the primary problems? And then maybe I'd like, it would be useful to see also how you see your own company's strategy, taking advantage or responding to this challenge.
So the primary challenge which I see is in respect to the infrastructure and labor laws, and third is ease of doing business. Now, in terms of the infrastructure, for example, you need for setting up a large manufacturing base, a lot of railways, power, as well as deep water ports. Now, look at in India, the railway freight cost is, if it is 100 in India, in China it is 60% of that. Whereas if you see the passenger fare, China, it is 240% of what it is in India. So you are cross-subsidizing. In terms of power cost, in India, the industrial power cost is around 15 cents for a 1 unit. In US, it is 4 to 6 cents. In China, it is 7 cents. In Japan, it is 6 cents. And you are making it very, very inefficient for Indian manufacturing to do that. And the primary pillar for any manufacturing company is to be cost effective. And then technology, and third part is the market. The market and technology access is available to India, but the major constraint is on the infrastructure side. Now look at the labor laws. We have the Industrial Dispute Act is way back on 1947. Trade Union Act is of 1926. The Factory Act is of 1948. So those laws are no more relevant in today's business environment. So these needs to be changed. The third thing is ease of doing business. Now, for example, look at India has a large resources. Now, so far, these resources were not allocated on a transparent way, and there was a whims and fancy of some of the people who were having the discretionary powers. And these led to the corruption, and these led to under-exploitation of the resources. India is having large resources of bauxite, large resources of iron ore, coal, and yet we are importer of iron ore, we are importer of the coal. We import 200 million ton of coal, whereas we can be the largest producer of the coal. We produce only 550 million ton of coal, and whereas we should be producing 2 billion ton of coal annually, and we have ample resources. So these are the policies which were flawed, because of which there was no level playing field. I'll give my example. We are the largest steel company in the country. We have made $10 billion investment on ground, and yet we don't have any kind of a mineral which was allocated to us. After this new ordinance which was passed, the coal mines were auctioned. First coking coal mine we have secured in the auction last week. And that's the beauty about it, and that's what is changing. And if these things are changing, and if there is a transparent way and there is a level playing field, I think capital can come in and you have all kind of ingredients to take on. It may be a debate that how much time will we take to reach to this, the stage where China is today, but we can very well be there.
Could you just elaborate a little bit for our audience when you said the labor laws, etc. So what are some of the implications of that on a day-to-day basis for you as you think of expansion and growth?
The manufacturing companies, they have to employ a lot of people. And when you employ them in a permanent setup, then it should be very easy for you to judge the people based on their competence. And you can decide whether you want to continue with a person in even if he is incompetent or if he is competent. Now that kind of a liberty is not available today. Now if you want to set up a industrial body, like I am setting up a power plant, there is a boiler, you have to generate steam. Now I know what kind of a facility I have to set up. There is a boiler inspector which will be coming and doing the inspection, and he will be giving me a certificate, whereas he does not know what is the latest technology is all about. And that leads to the corruption, and because you will have to do various. Similar kind, there are the factory inspector for, in developed world, you will be talking about the OSHA for the safety standards, how many recordable accidents you are having. In India, you will be having a factory inspector who will be coming and inspecting and giving you a certificate and talking about it. So these are the things which makes very difficult for a company to employ large pool of people. So then they go on an outsourcing model, and because of which the differentiation comes in.
So what you're saying is that basically the rigidity in employment laws is making it very difficult for you to operate in a simple, transparent fashion where you bring in employees, evaluate them, and move on. So clearly that is going to be a very major part of resolving that is going to be a very major part. So any thoughts from any of you on, bringing Mr. Padmanabhan, what do you see as the improvement? Because clearly without fixing the labor laws in some senses or providing some solutions of that kind, these things are going to be very, very difficult to address. So do you see what in the Make in India paradigm do you see as addressing these kinds of issues?
I think our budget and the policy announcements that have happened in the last 6 months are actually to address some of these long-term issues from a growth perspective in India. I looked at the social aspects of the budget announcements. There is the economic reforms, the fiscal reforms, and also the policy announcements with respect to the social aspects. And when you look at it, some of these are very long-term in intent. The direction of having a universal social security system. When I look back in the late 70s and early 80s, US had a similar situation. Yeah. And I think that's a huge step forward. The second aspect, which the government is taking a lot of effort now, is the opportunity to make a large population access to banking. Okay, there are challenges, enormous amount of challenges. Aadhaar is not a panacea for all these issues, but it's a starting point. And if you look at the US social evolution, there was a phase of data cleansing process in the social security system. And I think a similar approach will happen in India. So the second aspect is giving an opportunity for the people to get into the banking opportunities. The third large policy announcement is this option of making the corporate taxes becoming lower. Yeah. Now, they may look as dots unconnected, but if you look at the opportunities that are coming about in terms of making a nationwide pension scheme, Also the opportunities for insurance, the accident insurance, the health insurance, and the life insurance. These are really fundamentally different policy announcements in this budget. And then when you try to connect all these dots, some of the issues that we have, it is not going to replace labor reforms, but it also helps in making labor reforms easier. Because as 70% of the population get access to bank, get access to social security system, are able to invest in a pension scheme for the future, there is a climate and a cultural environment which gets created for making better labor reforms. That's the way I look at it. And the challenges, while infrastructure is a major challenge, I feel there are two aspects which are much deeper. One is the social inequity that exists, and it is expanding in India. And it can create a lot of challenges going forward. The second I feel is the youth unemployment. And that's a big issue. Now, Make in India deeply addresses these two aspects. Like Ajay Kapoor was saying, they actually address these two aspects. While it does have an impact on lower imports and more production within the country, if implemented in a proper manner, it finally would address this together with the universal social security system and the opportunity for banking and the enabling framework of a digital India. And I know when I look at the larger context, I think these are all going to come together. Now, will it take 30 years for us to be where US is today? I hope not. I hope we are able to cross the challenges in the next 10, 15 years.
Anybody else with some thoughts on how the Make in India would actually translate into on the ground changes? Because the problems that have been outlined, and I won't spend too much time on the infrastructure problem because it's being tackled in other panels too, but the labor laws, the ease of doing business, those two have been brought in. A third one, which I'm going to throw into the mix as we go along, is that if you take a list of the world's most polluted cities, unfortunately, the truth is that Indian cities are a disproportionately high number of that. And now there is, including Delhi, which used to be a reasonably, breathable quality of air, is now heading that kind of list. So if you think of through the environment in as a challenge too, so what do you see as the actual steps that would be useful or are being taken or should be taken to resolve these? And I'll begin with Mr. Shukla and pass it along, because I think this is a big question which we'd like to hear from all of you.
Yeah.
What do we do with it?
Before the environment, I just wanted to make one small supplementary point to what my colleague said. What can we do to facilitate Make in India? And as I said earlier, there are two distinct segments, Make More in India and Make First Time in India. Both of them have separate requirements. Sometimes we tend to paint everything with one brush. As far as Make More in India is concerned, of things we are already making, and we are in top 3, top 4 in those product categories in the world, is to facilitate ease of doing business. That one single fact is needed to make more in India of those items, because we have demonstrated proven capabilities of making them, be it steel or cement or textiles or shoes. It is Make First Time in India which needs facilitation over and above the ease of doing business. Because whatever we may do on labor reforms is not going to make something happen which is Make First Time in India. Whatever we may do by improving electricity supply is not going to make something happen Make First Time in India. That will not happen. You can't start making passenger airliners in India just because electricity supply is 24 hours. So I'm making a clear distinction between Make More in India and Make First Time in India. As far as Make First Time in India is concerned, we are going to take certain out-of-box steps which go beyond labor, electricity, road, transport. It all goes beyond that. These are high-value items which are typically made in numbers which you count on your 10 fingers or at best 20 fingers and toes. You talk about importing 24 aeroplanes. you talk about importing 12 submarines, you talk about importing 2 aircraft carriers, and you have run up a bill of $10 billion. Your quarterly current account deficit taken care of. So we are talking about these things in numbers, which you can count, and these are not the things affected by everything else discussed with respect to make more in India. Here, we need to enter into strategic partnerships with the leading nations of the world. We need to have nations of the world agreeing to partner with India in technology transfer. If it is aviation and defense, there are only 5 people, the Security Council members we are talking about. Out of that, 1 is out of question. So that across Himalayas, so that leaves us 4. And with them, you have to do strategic partnership to make first time in India possible. In capital equipment and machinery, it will be, you will add to the list 2 or 3 more, Germany, France, but that's it. So basically strategic partnerships with half a dozen countries is what we are talking to make it happen, one out of box. And second out of box is that you need to make certain things mandatory. That is why most countries evolved. So if you are going to be the largest importing nation of aeroplanes for next 3 years, there is no reason why you cannot mandate that 30% of offset has to happen in India. So that becomes the step 1 for industry to start making components, assemblies and parts before moving on to next step. So this is the distinction I'm making. I'm sorry, you had asked a question on environment. We have on environment certain, we are in one part of the world. It's like our neighborhood is defined. We can choose friends, but we can't choose neighbors. So we have neighbors given. Similarly, geography location cannot be denied. Northern India will always have one handicap of high temperatures and high dusty environment, being next to Rajasthan and Sindh desert. Like Boston will always have snow in December and January. We have to have certain factors given, and then very objectively, very dispassionately, we have to realize what can be done and what cannot be done. Pollution can be either controlled or shifted. There are 2 ways of doing it. I'm also chairman of Mahindra Racing and electric cars. So the electric cars are one way of reducing pollution in the cities. But not many people are able to take a full picture. If electricity is still produced in Madhya Pradesh or Jharkhand in India, what is happening is pollution actually is being shifted to a remote area. But electricity which comes is clean, and therefore in Bombay, Delhi, Bangalore, you can have little reduction in pollution. So there are 2 different steps. One step is curbing it at an overall level, and second is shifting it to a place where it hurts you less. So that is spreading of pollution instead of having a dense pocket. But if manufacturing will happen, certain increase in pollution is inevitable with manufacturing. Same thing goes for anything. If you have car batteries, they are produced. If you have to change the car battery every 3 years of an electric car, whereas petrol or diesel engine may run for 20 years, that is also an element of pollution. So when you take an overall picture, we are talking about optimization and not really absolute reduction in absolute terms. And we have to find our own ways of finding a solution.
Mr. Kapoor, what would be your take on, and it could be, labor laws, ease of doing business, environment, I'm saying, but the major obstacles that we've seen. And also I'd like you to comment a little bit on your own, where is the money being put in terms of, how much of your growth plans are set up for India as opposed to going, overseas, and that would be, part of what we'd like to see also as we go along. But let's begin with the first part first, which
okay. It's a very, very interesting question, and I think last evening on a dinner table, some of us were discussing exactly the same thing. First, I'll give a very base take from, from a perspective, and then I'll try and address more detailed ones. India, as I mentioned, 60% of the population still resides in the villages. By and large, we are a very sustainable country. And I'll give you examples. In India, nothing gets destroyed ever. A PET bottle of Coke, when it's bought, after you consume the Coke, it goes back into the freezer to put your, water. And I think I can already see smiles of people who know what I'm saying. Eventually it goes into, in a poor house, it also goes into the toilet. So you know what I'm saying. Similarly, you never discard clothes. It just goes from a rich house to the poor house, and then finally it goes as a duster or a mop on the floor. As a society, we are very sustainable. Large parts of our people live in thatched houses. They still cook food with the cow dung, which is, most biodegradable form of, burning your, and they still, rely a lot on agriculture. Now imagine if all those people at 1,500 per capita went up to even 6,000, which is China, or maybe add another 2-3,000, which is Korea. Everybody would have enough money to start affording, beyond cell phones, go to television and go to refrigerator. When you do that, you need power. And where is the power coming from? From the energy which is getting imported outside of India, because we are not able to produce that much coal, which is available in India. And I think that's what my colleague Prashant was trying to address some time back. But let's leave at that. Does it mean that we should not grow? Does it mean that our poor should remain poor? Answer is no. But the fact is, look at US or look at Europe. Walk into any good city and walk into a market in the night, and you'll find more bulbs on inside a showroom which shuts at 6 o'clock and it's on up to the early morning. Why? So the West is telling us in the East that you should determine your own levels of pollution and your CO2 emissions. But what are they doing? Why are those showrooms lit up? Why is so much of wasteful expenditure happening all over the world? I think US suffers the most on obesity. Is because of the consumption issues. You consume far more Coke per person, you consume far more coffee per person than actually which is needed. Fortunately in India we don't suffer from that. Now coming to my sector, cement, and I'm going to talk real numbers. As a company, Ambuja Cement, we produce CO2 when we produce cement. Why? Because the process of making cement is you have to really heat it at 1200 degrees centigrade, for which I need to burn coal, and then some emissions go into the air. They are within the permissible limits as per the law, but the fact is CO2 still gets generated. As much as when you drive a car, the CO2 does get generated. What have we done? We have actually reduced our footprint by 30% over the last 20 years. As a company, Holcim, which is a Swiss company and governed under the global standards, and you have CO2 tax in Europe. So we are already thinking, and we worked with KPMG last year on a project called True Value, which basically looks at all the 3 dimensions of your business. So we are saying, if we have to have license to lead, license to exist, we must make sure that we already shift our gear into a sustainability as a main agenda. So 2 years back as a company, we brought our vision as being most sustainable and competitive, and we changed the word admired to sustainable. The moment I do that, we met with our top 60 managers and we said, okay, what does it mean for us? Is it a fashionable word to have? So people look at it and, government, when we go for permits, we get permits more easily. Is that what it is? The fact is, if you are sustainable, which means you're going to remove or reduce your environmental footprint, leave no trace. That was the philosophy with which we went. So we started making green product, which means a cement in which we could add fly ash, which is a byproduct of a power producer, and we replaced 30% of our raw material through fly ash. Straight away it became profitable. It increased our margins versus others who are not doing it by at least 2 or 3 percentage points. Then we said, okay, we run our kiln. Can we make it more efficient? Can we reduce our thermal energy consumption by few percentage points? The moment we do that, we become more sustainable. But is it improving our margins? Is it improving our profitability? Answer is a big yes. Third is your logistics. If you look at your supply chain, we are the only cement company which started shipping in our company. We have a plant in Gujarat, which is close to coast. So we build our own port. And then we have in Bombay a landing jetty, which we build our own jetty. Then Surat, which is another part of Gujarat, where again we built our jetty. So we ship almost 20% of our cement through shipping, and we own our own 10 ships and we have 300 people working in shipping. Why did we do that? Because I believe over 2 decades, it has paid us off. It is more sustainable. And we throw less CO2 out. We don't clutter the already congested roads. So this was our way, but we had to also put investment for it. And I believe the answer is that over the next 10 years, we'll have to, another thing, we use a lot of water for our process. And when you go and ask permit from government to set up a new plant, the first thing they ask is, are you going to spoil the water? In Rajasthan, it is it's a place where you always have water shortage. And I'm proud to tell you the factory we have in Rajasthan charges 3 times more water in the system than what we consume. And as a company, this is the 5th year in a row we have got our water measured through an external agency, and this year we were 4 times charging more water in the environment than what we consume. So actually you have to really put it right up front, and when you do this, it actually pays off. The issue here is, because when I talk to people in the Ministry of Environment and Forest, the regulated sector, the companies which are sitting here, are very well regulated. They're as well regulated as you are in US or in Europe. And believe me, we have 1,000 controls and everything is measured properly. All my emission standards are directly loaded onto the website of the government and they can watch it. They have satellites to track it. It's the unregulated sector. It is the small traders, it's the small factories. It's those bhattas of bricks, if you understand, the small brick manufacturing factories which emit a lot of, and if you know Gujarat, you have those chakras, which are made locally, and the amount of emission they give, those are the unregulated ones. In the automobile sector, you'll see, and my colleague here can confirm, from the Bharat Stage 1 to the Bharat Stage 3, I think most of the new cars which are made in India or used in India absolutely have zero emission standards. I think the move towards metro in Delhi, metro in Calcutta, and now going to all the other centers is the need of the hour. We need to have more public transportation spaces change. I think finally we'll have to bring back more cycles into what France and Paris has been doing. I think that's the only way. I won't recommend horses because they will maybe make the cities more dirty.
I have one last question before we open up to this, and I think this will very naturally segue into that, and I'd like to hear, especially from the other side of the table, what would you say is the greatest opportunity for people graduating from HBS today? What would be your message to them in terms of what does Make for India imply for their careers and their opportunities? And so I'll leave it to Mr. Jain to start. And then
yeah. So my take will be entrepreneurship, because what I personally feel is that this new digital India, clean India, make in India, skill India, the new drive which has started, and urbanization, housing for all by 2022, you will be seeing that there will be the opportunities which will be opened up in each and every sector, and there will be a huge scope which will be for medium and small enterprises also. So entrepreneurship is one area which I will see that young minds like you guys have to look at it, and there will be a huge scope for that.
I think the opportunities that are there in India will increase in the education and health sector. The education has not reached a large population, and today there are methods of making it reach, and there are classic examples. The Salman Khan Academy is one such example. It addresses a certain aspect of education, but there are a whole lot of other aspects of education which are yet to be built and delivered to the population in India. In fact, the children in Kenya, Kenyan schools, in the unorganized Kenyan schools, not the organized ones, today have access to learning through a very ordinary mobile phone. There was a wonderful program on BBC. There are tremendous opportunities from that aspect, delivering education to the people who have not been able to get it. The second area I feel is in the health areas. Today technology is available and instruments are available. All you need to have is an integrative capability and a monitoring capability to deliver basic screening health systems. Not the huge preventive and curative kind of health systems, but the screening health systems. And these have not reached the larger population in India. While this 70,000 crore of money is going to go in building the infrastructure, the roads, the ports, the railways, the recent budget has all these numbers and efforts. I feel the soft aspects of logistics and distribution is a huge open space where it will still be asset light or medium asset intensive, not completely asset light like the websites and other things, but medium asset intensive. But the space is so underserved: storage systems, distribution systems, logistic systems, especially with the growth in the retail and consumer business that is happening in India. And as more money reaches more people who can buy retail goods, I feel the distribution and logistics is a huge area of opportunity.
Thank you. I think we'd like to open the thing up to the House now, so let's begin with you.
Thank you very much. I'm Pradeep Kapoor from the University of Maryland, professor there on international trade, development and security issues. Earlier ambassador and diplomat with the Government of India for 35 years. I just want to address the panelists on one point. The INDCs, the intended nationally determined contributions in climate change. There's going to be a lot of discussion in Paris in December. Now, the stakeholders in this process have earlier been the scientists, technologists, and then the government, then the bureaucrats, then the civil society, the NGOs, the media, and finally the corporate sector globally is getting involved. To what extent is the corporate sector in India involved in this whole process, and in terms of, you know, articulating its own contributions? Like Ambuja Cement, I don't know, you mentioned such brilliant points, whether these are going to be taken on board, and whether the other sectors, other representatives here, whether your corporates are also going to be doing something significantly in this area. This is just a thought. Okay. Thank you.
So maybe I'll.
That's a better one.
That's a better one. Okay, fine. So I'll firstly to tell you, yeah, corporates are doing a lot of initiatives here. So World Business Council for Sustainable Development, to which our group company Wholesome is a part of, and they have a subsect on CSI, Cement Sustainability Initiative, globally. I was the co-chair for last year for India, and in that capacity we meet a couple of times in a year. We bring all the CEOs, and it's only a CEO forum, so bring all the CEOs of the cement companies in India. And we already made a roadmap of what we have to do. We also look at the global roadmap, which other countries and other companies have agreed to. Our principal, Wholesome, has already come out with its Sustainability Roadmap 2020 and beyond. And obviously, as a group company, we are very much tied into that. At Ambuja, this true value is already aimed at 2020. So with that, you actually go back to the board of directors and tell that, okay, maybe in the next 10 years or so, you got to spend maybe X thousand crores. However, if you do that, and if tomorrow government actually comes out with legislation which taxes you on CO2 emissions, then with this investment and without that investment, how are you going to survive it? And I think it forces you to start thinking about your paradigms, and that's how the shift takes place. One very interesting thing which I forgot to share in my initial comments, cement still is a bag product in India, 50 kg bags, which is not the case in US or Europe. 90% or 95% is bulk. It just goes into concrete, therefore you don't even see it. In India, it's still seen as a FMCG kind of a category. So we pack cement in plastic bags. We don't bag it in paper, because number one, paper would also mean you cut so many more trees, and then it's very expensive, and then handling is by rail. Now when you pack cement by plastic, it's again you're leaving a trace. So we took a position 2 years back that we will we calculated to manufacture 22 million tons of cement that we produce. We use about 30,000 kgs tons of plastic in various forms. So for the last 2 years, we have been burning more than 30,000 tons of plastic in our kiln as a fuel, as a replacement to coal. So it actually pays off, as long as you have a strategy in place and you make investments in place. Another thing which we are doing as a company is that we are using alternate fuels. So waste of one industry can actually become a fuel for the other industry. So we have made an investment of 250 crore rupees in our company today. And I can tell you in the next 10 years, it's going to pay us back tremendously. But first you have to put that money, platforms and global best processes, and then you start bringing in sludges, you bring plastics, you bring all sorts of waste, including the municipal waste, which the cities are going to give us in plenty. So, a shit of one industry, or actually all of us, can actually become a fuel of another sector.
Yeah, great.
I just have a question, a quick question. I mean, can India overtake China to become a global manufacturer? I don't think it is going to do that, because from what I understand, the political system in India, and also the caste, creed and all that, these are the social impediments. Because I thought, if ever between China and India, if anyone going to be a superpower, I think it will be China, not India, because we have so many divisions. I mean, this is besides how the changing the labor laws and all those other things. I don't know how do you react.
Actually, this.
So it's a question or an answer you given on.
Okay.
This is my question.
So I would like to say in this, see, look at one part is that China could unleash its all potential because, you know, it has got the huge resources as well as the market. You know, because of its huge population, it created its population to its advantage. And that's what India needs to do that. We can really say that, yet last 10 years, we could not really capitalize on this opportunity. But there is a big difference which is happening today in India is now that the young people, they are coming into the job market. You know, the total election process has got changed in last 4 years. Because of the youth coming into the job market, the voting has dramatically increased by 15 to 20%. All the provincial or federal elections, every single election result outcome is a clear majority. And that's what the youth is wanting because they want job. Because the India has a huge advantage of it is having a youth which is aspirational, which is English speaking, which is very, very different from China. And now 15 million people are coming to the job market, and in next 10 years, 250 million people will be coming to the job market. So India has another unique advantage now is that, you know, it has independent judiciary, strong banking institution. So India can very well build on from here today. One thing is sure that, you know, we can catch up to China, but how long we will be taking up that time, that is a question mark because you need to see the real implementation part of it.
You also wanted to respond to that? Yeah.
I wanted to just supplement what Prashant just said. Very often we get lost in comparisons of so much steel produced in China, so much steel produced in India. So many mobile phones per 100 people in China, so many mobile phones per 100 people in India. So many cars, 100 people China, 100 people India. That is one part of the story. Complete picture is often missed. Complete picture will be when we talk about time scale. China started liberalization 30 years ago. India started liberalization perhaps 15 years ago. So there is a 15 years setback. So when you plot anything on the graph, you realize, and I'll give you one very simple example of mobile. In the year 2000, mobile penetration in India was what was in China in 1995. In 2005, mobile penetration in India was what was in China in 2000. So there was 5 years gap. By the time 2010 came, mobile penetration in both the countries was equal because there could be only that many mobile phones in China, and after that it stops, and India continued to catch up. So starting points of the race are different, one starting 30 years ago and one starting 15 years ago. And therefore that catch up is going on till the time one cannot go any further on that scale, but other continues to catch up. So in actual terms, today there is a vast difference on every parameter, but at all times we need to look at the graph, how the catch up is going, and you find that catch up is happening item by item, category by category, and finally I do believe that it is a matter of time when, with all democracy in place, with full freedom of speech in place, with full law, rule of law in place, India will catch up.
Yes, please go ahead. Yeah.
For the younger generation, sorry, very quick. For the younger generation, we have examples of Ola Cab, we have Flipkart, who probably have achieved success in a very short time span, whereas compared to like some of the industries you represent, which have taken like maybe half a century to reach that same success level. What would be your message to the younger generation? Why they should stick to the industrial manufacturing field?
That's a very interesting one. I can only share my own experience. You know, as I said, I started my career with the service sector. So I was in banking and, you know, selling credit cards and selling car loans. And when I look at the way the transformation of a particular sector, I represent cement, from a government controlled sector in which the industry was losing money, there was a lot of black marketing, there was bad name for the industry, to today where government is out of this business. All the entrepreneurs have, all global companies as well as local companies are there. And, just last year I hired an EA who came to me from BCG. So he came to US, he took his MS, he went to IIM, took his MBA, he's a chartered accountant, worked with a whole lot of other companies, and one fine day he came to give me an interview. As a young man, why do you want to come to me? He said, look, I like this company, I've seen the company grow, and today he works with me. So I think what manufacturing offers is something very interesting and unique. It offers you real, tangible products and assets. It is good to see Flipkarts, and that's also the modern India. The IT is our hub, strategy, the service sector. But as I said, what I couldn't finish in the first half was, you also need to create 100 million jobs for the country to actually grow. And services, unfortunately, cannot throw up so many jobs. And therefore, from political perspective and from equilibrium of our society, it's important that our manufacturing catches up. Now to, somehow just add on to Mr. Shukla's answer to your question and answer both, So the fact is that China today is already, when I have some statistic, two actually, which I'd like to share with you. One which will make you all proud, the ones who are proud Indians, that today, after Indonesia, India has the lowest index on cost of manufacturing. China is more expensive than India. Now on the other one, which is something which is a catch-up game, if the global manufacturing GDP is taken, China is about 2.94 trillion US dollars. United States is 2.17. India is ranked number 8 at 0.24. Now the current strategy is that if India grows at 10 to 11% over till 2030, the new scale would be like this. China would still remain at about 7 trillion, number 1. United States would be number 2 at about 3.2, and India would become number 3 at about 1.4. I think that's good enough for us, and we should be very happy with that.
I just want to add one point about that, is that in the manufacturing sector, the kind of a job you give to the people, and then the people who are not educated. Like for example, when I go to the steel plant, it employs 18,000 people directly, 20,000 people indirectly, and then allied industry and their family you see together, those people are getting jobs. So sense of inclusiveness, what it gives the manufacturing sector, you don't get in the technology side of it. Yes, you will be having a bigger bank balance and a market cap, but sense of inclusion comes in manufacturing.
But let me just clarify one point, since you wanted to know message. Let us not brand all manufacturing with one brush. You can have a large $10 billion petrochemical plant employing only 365 people. And I talk numbers when I know them. So $10 billion oil and gas plant could be run with 365 people only. The jobs get created at petrol pumps, 150,000 of them all over, which are in sales and distribution. Similarly, you could have Germany and Japan, the most advanced manufacturing nations in the world. But only 15% of their population is employed in manufacturing. So the point I'm making is this, there is manufacturing and there is manufacturing. There is manufacturing which will employ a large number of people. China has succeeded at doing it through low-cost manufacturing and textiles and many consumer products, so much so that even statue of goddess Lakshmi and God and Ganesha come on Diwali from China. Shame on us. But having said that, there is very high-tech manufacturing where the goal is to have technology in India, to be at the cutting edge of technological frontier. And then there is manufacturing which is aimed at creating employment, and that will be mostly in consumer industries where you will have large number of people employed in toy making, textile, garments, and both supplement each other. They are not either or. India needs both.
Last question for us.
Question has 2 parts. First part is to Mr. Shukla regarding your indication of providing a mandate that 30% of the aviation sector gets manufactured in India. We're going to import that. I work for GE Research and produce a lot of aircraft engines. I think one of the challenges is for India to get to that level, I think we need to create a high-tech manufacturing sector so that a lot of the restrictions get posed by the US export control laws that prevent that technology from getting transferred. So India can rise to that level where we generate, say, photonics, nanotechnology, medical systems, material science, and so forth to that level. Instead of just engineering sector or service sector, that's I think that would be important. Second part is I thought this session was combined between manufacturing and renewable energy. I think we kind of missed the renewable energy. We didn't talk much about it. My question is, how does, I think there was a projection of 100 gigawatt or so renewable energy.
175.
How do we get to that level from where we stand today? US has a natural gas boom that is kind of restricting their renewable energy to India. In US, does India has such problem? And how does that stand with the coal development plan that you just mentioned?
So let me take renewable energy first. We produce 35, Mahindra Group produces 35 megawatts of solar energy already. And by next year, we would be producing 100 megawatts. That's because group has very high focus on sustainability as well as renewable energy as an element. That is why we went into electric cars. And not many people realize that as of 31st December last year, largest number of electric cars on planet were Mahindra cars. I'm not talking hybrids. So that is our focus on renewables and electric and solar energy and such related fields. There is no getting away from the fact that India will need renewable, which will help in controlling pollution. The price, oil price bump is an erratic phenomenon. It happens now and then. Prices have gone up and come down. This happens every now and then. This is the cycle. Energy pricing, like any other commodity pricing like steel, goes through cycles. So one is steady state development within India for renewables is independent of oil prices coming down, because supply contracts which are entered into state electricity boards, they are 10 years, 15 years contracts. And then they stay in place whether oil price has come down or gone up. Reason being, electricity being produced through conventional sources in India is being sold at a price lower than the production cost. So when price of oil comes down, it has no effect on the consumer prices. All it does is cost of production comes down, but price to the consumer is not changing. So demand supply situation in the market is not changing. Renewable will continue. Your part one, which you said, talk about aerospace and defense, you answered the question yourself. So I will say yes, whatever you said was right.
Well, folks, I think we are out of time now, so we'll stop the thing here. I'd like to acknowledge and thank our panelists for an absolutely outstanding